Hi friends, welcome back to Brilliant Blue Reviews. My name is Heather, and in this video I'm going to be giving you my review of the movie Anniversary. Alright, this movie is described as being a dystopian political thriller, which is true. However, I found it mostly to be basically a drama. It gets increasingly more like a dystopian thriller the farther along in the movie it goes. And I would even say, like, toward the end of it, it's quite terrifying, like the concept of what happens, and pretty creepy, actually. Probably last third of the movie, it was giving me Handmaid's Tale vibes. And I'm talking about Handmaid's Tale, the movie that came out, I want to say in the 80s, with Aidan Quinn, Natasha Richardson, Robert Duvall, and Faye Dunaway. If you saw that movie, that's kind of what it started to feel like in the atmosphere and the way it felt and stuff near the end of this movie. Okay, this movie was rated R. Reasons it's rated R are there's a lot of profanity, there's a lot of adult themes and topics. They talk about sex, there's people who smoke, they show people drinking a lot, they show people doing drugs. They talk about drugs. There's some very serious things that happen in the movie. There is a small amount of violence. There's a lot of marital and familial issues that come up. There's discussion of termination of a pregnancy. There's discussion of homosexual sex. There's discussion of heterosexual sex. There's all sorts of adult themes and elements, mostly that are talked about, not necessarily shown. The drinking and the drug use and a little bit of violence is shown. So it definitely needed its R rating. I've never heard of the director before, and I can't even remember his name right now. And I'm not going to remember the names of any of the actors except for McKenna Grace, who I think plays one of the daughters. And I've only heard of her. I don't remember what I may have seen her in before. The main two actors are Diane Lane, who plays Ellen, and
Kyle Chandler,
who plays Paul, and their husband and wife. And the title comes from it's their wedding anniversary. Now, I really like both of those actors. One of the main reasons I wanted to see this film was because of them. They both do a phenomenal job. This is a very well acted movie. It's really quite intense and dramatic. All of the actors in this movie do a really amazing job. The basic concept is, it starts out, it's Paul and Ellen are married, and it's their 25th wedding anniversary. They have 4 children who are basically all adults. They have one daughter who still lives at home. So they have 3 daughters, Anna, Cynthia, and Bertie, and one son whose name is Josh. Well, I'll just kind of tell you what everybody's doing, at least at the beginning of the movie. So Paul, the husband, he owns a restaurant, and he's a restaurateur. And then Ellen is a college professor at Georgetown University. The movie is supposedly set in Washington, D.C., and Georgetown in like suburban Washington, D.C. They have a very nice home right on the Potomac River. But I noticed at the end when I was watching the credits that the whole movie was filmed in Ireland. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I wasn't ever really sure what order and age the 4 kids were. The only thing that was very clear was that Bertie was the youngest. Because Bertie was still living at home. I think she was in high school. She's a science geek. She's very intelligent, and she likes science a lot. And she pretty much like does lab experiments in her bedroom and stuff. And she's really into the environment and science and things. The other 3, it never is really clear what order they were in age. But one daughter, Cynthia, is an attorney, and she's married to Rob, who is also an attorney. And they're environmental lawyers, so they take on cases, having to do with the environment. Anna, the other older daughter, is a lesbian, and she is a comedian. And she does like political comedy and stuff, and she's very outspoken and everything. Their son, Josh, seems to kind of be a little bit the black sheep. So he was a writer, and he wrote science fiction. And he wrote a novel, but he apparently does not think that he was a very good writer, even though his mom, Ellen, tries to like encourage him and say, no, I thought your novel was really good, your short story was really good, and he fights back against that. And at the beginning of the movie, it's the parents, Paul and Ellen's 25th anniversary party. They're having a party in the backyard of their home. And all the kids are there. And Josh, their son, brings his new girlfriend, whose name is Elizabeth. At some point during the party, Ellen realizes that she knows Elizabeth already, that Elizabeth was a former student of hers at Georgetown, and that she had very grave concerns about Elizabeth's ideas and things that she wrote and things like that when she had her class. And apparently it kind of sounded like she almost got kicked out of Georgetown for her radical views or something like that. But Elizabeth is a very interesting character. I would say that the two characters that are the most fascinating in this movie, I mean, they all do a very good job, and they all go through quite a lot of character change and development, and things happen to them because it takes place over 5 years. But the two that you really want to watch are the character of their son, Josh, and his girlfriend, who later becomes his wife, Elizabeth. They're quite something. I went back and forth through the movie trying to decide which one of them was actually worse and which one ended up being more evil, because they're really fascinating, and they change quite a bit. It starts out at their anniversary party for their 25th anniversary, and their life is very happy, and they love their family, and they're very in love with each other. Ellen and Paul are still after 25 years, and they love having all their kids there, and they're a very free-thinking, critical thinking type family, have really interesting discussions and things like that. It ends with at their 30th anniversary party 5 years later, and everything has changed. The way they feel about each other, really hasn't changed, but they're having a lot of trouble by the end. And their lives have changed dramatically, and everything about the country has changed. It all sort of stems from Elizabeth, their son's girlfriend that he brings to the party at their 25th anniversary. She took this paper that had caused such an uproar when she was in Ellen's class at Georgetown, and she actually turned it into a book, and it's called The Change. Ellen perceives it, and her daughters also perceive it, as a very anti-democratic, concerning view on the United States. Like it has very strong echoes of what's happening in the United States now, today, and like what could go wrong. Like it's really interesting. This book starts selling like crazy. It's kind of saying that it's through this book, like this, everybody starts buying this book, and she makes a whole bunch of money off this book. And her and Josh get married, and now they're very wealthy. And then they have kids, and they become quite famous and fairly powerful, but it's tied up with this corporation that they're part of. And so there's business interests in it and stuff, and it's kind of too much to get into in this review, but everything about the country changes, and people start, and it's Birdie, the youngest daughter, is actually kind of narrating, and things start changing in the country very rapidly and dramatically, and people in the United States start being very closely monitored. There's lots of censorship. The internet is rationed, they say. Drones that actually come down in their yards and are like spying on people. They take a new census, and it's like really creepy dystopian stuff. And that's the kind of stuff that started to remind me of Handmaid's Tale. So it gets really extreme like that. And they're kind of this one holdout family that is like, no, we're not going to sign up for, like everybody around them in their neighborhood has agreed to sign off and be part of the change. And they're like, no, we're not going to do that. And it starts to come to a point where they're having to make very difficult choices to protect their own children. Progressively, as this goes on, because it's kind of like a couple of years it's 2 years later, and then 1 year later, and then 1 year later, Josh, their son, ends up being way scarier than Elizabeth was. So Elizabeth wrote the book, and she kind of seems like she's kind of the mastermind of everything at the beginning. But then she almost seems like she's starting to get like, I don't know, this might have gone too far, but I'm still not sure about her. If you see this movie, I really want to know what your opinion is of Elizabeth at the end. And one of the things that I wish they would have explored more is she very quickly, at the very beginning, at the 25th anniversary party, says to Paul and Ellen, Josh's parents, that she was an only child and that she came from a Midwest divorced parents or something like that. And she talks about how she has so much rage because she came from this divorced family and she never had any siblings. I really got the impression at the beginning of the movie, and again at the very end of the movie, that at the root of everything about her is jealousy. That she wanted a big, happy family like this. You know, she wanted the married parents and all the kids and the nice house and all of that. And she wanted that, and she didn't get to have that. And this is just my speculating. But kind of her motivation for writing this book and everything was to try to like get that. I don't know. It was weird. And in the end, she kind of does have that. She has a husband and she has kids and she has a very nice life and she's wealthy and everything. But then she starts to seem unhappy and very almost scared. And her husband, their son Josh, goes way off the deep end and he becomes like a real psycho. He's like really scary. How the different people in the family deal with him is really interesting because they all become almost like repulsed, like horrified by what he becomes. And it becomes pretty dramatic what happens. But I'm really not sure at the end, the end is really interesting. So you have to see it and tell me what you think of the end. I don't really know what to say without like giving away the plot of the movie. It's very disturbing and alarming, like what happens to this family, like not only what happens to the country, but what happens to this one particular family. And as Ellen says to Elizabeth at one point, she says, "You've annihilated us," which is really quite accurate, honestly. It is not a feel-good movie at all. It does not have a happy ending. So I just want to warn you about that. I actually got to a point where there was maybe about like 20 minutes left, and I thought that maybe something would happen that was going to restore everything. Like I was kind of hopeful, like this might happen or this might happen and everything's going to like go back the way it was before this happened, but it doesn't. Some pretty dramatic things happen at the end, but it's quite sobering and pretty upsetting, honestly. But it was very, very well done and very well acted, very well written. The director also wrote the movie, and very well acted by everybody in the movie. They did a very good job. So I would give this movie, for me, I'm going to give it 4 stars. It's not like, you know, a escapist, enjoyable thing to see, but it was a very well done movie and it was very interesting and really well done. So that's my review of Anniversary. I would give it 4 out of 5 stars. It's definitely worth seeing, but you have to be of the understanding that this is not going to be a happy, feel-good kind of thing. If you enjoyed this review, please be sure to give me a thumbs up down below and make sure that you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of my upcoming movie reviews. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.